Dear friends, I'm Operator Starsky reporting on day 1167 of Russia's three-day war. Let's talk about some of the most important updates of the week. For the first time in history, Ukrainian naval drone intercepted Russian fighter jets. Ukraine retaliates against Russian war machine, launching massive drone attacks. Cringy Russian Victory Day parade. Will Putin bring donkeys to the Red Square? My dear friends, this is the Frontline focus. Let's roll. Let's start with our traditional Frontline update. Apparently, the Russian military still thinks that human wave tactics are innovative. Their offensives in eastern Ukraine, especially around Chasiv Yar, are making progress in the same way a refrigerator makes progress when shoved down a staircase. Yes, there's movement. No, it's not elegant. And while the Russian grind fast near Chasiv Yar continues, the terrorists keep bombarding Ukraine with drones because nothing says 21st century superpower like using Iranian lawnmower drones. At the same time, Ukraine strikes back. In Bryansk Oblast, the Cotton Cutie has reportedly visited the Russian electronics factory Strela that is producing parts for the Russian war machine. In Novorossiysk, Krasnodarsky region, another Russian oil refinery quite literally went on strike. The Russians reported intercepting everything as usual. Earlier, the Russian military factory Crimean in Bryansk was attacked for the fifth time already. In the occupied Crimea, a number of Russian military air bases were improved. The witnesses reported explosions in Gvardiyske, Kacha, Belbek, and Novofedorivka. Also, Ukrainian flying objects visited Russian military factory in Vladimir Oblast, producing explosives for the Russian aviation and navy. As we can see, Russia is steadily winning the war in the most Russian dreams. And speaking about the steadily winning Russian invaders, according to random estimates, primarily optimistic of course, for Russia, considering current death toll and progress, the Russian invaders will need between 75 and 140 years to occupy whole Ukraine. In order to make it possible, they will need to sacrifice approximately 5 more million troops that will be marked as killed in action. And we're not even mentioning wounded, we're only talking about irreversible casualties. On the pessimistic spectrum, Putin will need much more population that is physically available in Russia at this point. And, I made a bunch of calculations myself, also involving ChatGPT, and those are the numbers I came up with. Also, I highly encourage you, my dear friends, to make your own research and share it in the comments. Additionally, the UK intelligence reported that Russia may suffer record losses in war against Ukraine in 2025. According to our British allies, Russia have lost approximately 160,000 people in the first 4 months. The overall Russian losses are estimated at staggering 950,000 dead and wounded since the start of the Russian suicidal full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Picture this, 2 high-speed multi-role Russian aircraft, each worth tens of millions of dollars, buzzing around Crimea like they own the place. Then suddenly out of the foggy Ukrainian Black Sea, a small remotely piloted Ukrainian boat shows up and says, "Hi there, I know it's awkward, but mind if I launch a Sidewinder real quick?" And the Russians, being the obedient servants of fate that they are, immediately get transferred from the Air Force into the Navy, because nothing says air superiority quite like getting down by a motorboat with a GoPro and a missile attached to it by carrying Ukrainian hands. A photo I found showcases the type of drone that possibly was involved in this terrific act of humiliation of the Russian Air Force. At first I thought that the drone used the Ukrainian R-73 missile, but it turns out that this time it was a US-built Sidewinder, which is interesting. But wait, there's also propaganda, because the Russian Ministry of Stolen Toilets of course said that the planes were lost due to friendly fire or pilot error or the sun was in their eyes. Pick whichever excuse sounds least like we got outsmarted by a remotely controlled Ukrainian motorboat. I think it's a remarkable case. Thumbs up to the Ukrainian Special Force. Meanwhile, the internationally wanted war criminal Putin graced us with a documentary appearance, proclaiming that Russia has all it needs to bring the war in Ukraine to its logical conclusion, which is something he repeats incessantly for 3 years straight, my friends. I bet in 2035 he will be saying the same, if by the time he's still alive, of course. Here's a translation of what he said. He still dreams of Ukraine surrendering, installing a puppet government, and joining the We Love Mother Russia fan club. He even claimed that Ukrainians are just Russians who got lost on the way to a vodka tasting. Classic Russian dictator, always rewriting history with a crayon. Additionally, Russian dictator found new excuses to justify his invasion of Ukraine. He said Russia was forced to invade Ukraine because the West kept ignoring independence and sovereignty of the terrorist federation for years. Literally, can you imagine this poor little Russia being abused by this big, scary, evil West for so many years, especially by this enormous and spooky country? I wonder what sort of excuse will emerge in Putin's head, for example, next year. We've already heard the main reasons, which was NATO annexing European countries, Nazi Jewish Ukrainian president, genetically modified dogs produced by American scientists in Ukrainian biolabs and designed to kill Russians. What's next? Please share your ideas in the comments, my friends. I'd really like to read that. And while Putin prepares his slaves in Russia for the Victory Day parade, his slaves in Ukraine received a whole train loaded with the post-World War II tanks produced in 40s and 50s. We're talking about several modifications of rusty and old Soviet T-62 brought to the Ukrainian front lines straight from the Russian stockpile. Some of those machines are almost 80 years old, and now the Russian invaders can quite literally repeat the glorious deeds of their grandfathers right in the actual tanks of their grandfathers. And this is not even the cringiest thing about the upcoming Russian parade in Moscow. The cringiest thing is that instead of Armata tanks, Putin should really show some of his actual vehicles. I'm talking about Bukhanka trucks, Chinese golf carts, motorbikes, donkeys, and of course, disposable Russian invaders on crutches. I would really like to see them marching down the Red Square, because that would definitely bring some tears to the Russian eyes. You know, my dear friends, I think it's really useful to sometimes look back at things that happened in 2022. Back in those days, Russia controlled almost 1/3 of Ukraine's territory, and their destitute-minded speakers on the national television were dreaming about Ukraine's capitulation in just a couple of weeks. 3 years later, Ukraine brings the war back to the Russian territory using advanced long-range drones, shoots down Russian aircraft without human personnel even involved, and launches its own ballistic missile program to bring even more fun to the Russian territory. The Russian Führer prepares a big celebration, inviting his European puppets for the Victory Day that he won't even attend himself. Modern Russian Armata tanks expected to be exposed on the Red Square, while Russian invaders on the front line expect a bunch of rusty post-war tanks and golf carts. This is absolutely hilarious, my friends, but this is also terrific because you don't often see empires collapsing, especially such big as the terrorist federation. And with that, my dear friends and family, I wish you all a beautiful day. Please subscribe to stay informed about the most important updates and share this content to help Ukraine be heard. I'll see you in the comments. I'm Operator Starsky. As always, be safe.